Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to Inter Games for yet another God Guide. This time, we're going to be undertaking the mammoth task of explaining CABRAKAN to you in SMITE 2. This is probably going to be quite a long guide, because this guy is basically versatility incarnate. You know, he can play arguably 4 roles effectively, at least 3 in jungle support and solo. You could argue he's a mid laner as well. He has been in SMITE 1 sometimes. He's also a hybrid in terms of strength and intelligence. He has mixed scaling and does well with both, and he's also a hybrid in the fact that he can go damage, he can go bruiser, he can go tank. There's a lot of different things you can do with his builds, and there's a lot of different roles you can play him in. So this will probably be a bit of a longer guide because I'll have to explain various different things for various different playstyles with CABRAKAN. But as always, we'll go over his abilities, his combos, his builds, all that kind of stuff. So let's just jump right in with his abilities first up. So CABRAKAN's passive is pretty simple actually. This is Shadow Zone. You and nearby allies take reduced damage, and you deal increased damage to enemies that damage you or nearby allies. This isn't like going to increase damage that enemies take from everything, it's just going to be from you. But the damage mitigation will be provided to you and all nearby allies. It's 4% mitigation, 3% damage increase. It's pretty simple, you don't need to think about it. Just being near people is going to make your team take less damage and their team take more damage from you. Moving into CABRAKAN's 1, which is Seismic Crush. This is one of his most important abilities. So basically you press this, you gain massive movement speed, attack speed, slow and root immunity, and your next basic attack is going to do bonus damage and stun. The damage is 40% intelligence, 60% strength, and yeah, you pop this, you run up, you stun people. Crucially, this stun does not DR. Diminishing returns is a mechanic in SMITE 2 for CC, and basically every time you're hit by a hard CC specifically, you will gain 1 stack of DR up to twice, which reduce future CC durations by 20%. So if you've been hit by 2 hard CCs previously and then you get hit by a 1-second stun, that's only actually going to last 0.6 seconds because of DR. But CABRAKAN's 1 crucially does not DR whatsoever. You can see I'm just going to get the same stun duration every single time I use it on this Ymir. Whereas my 2 stun, for example, which we'll get into a second, that will DR and it'll be a short duration. This is always going to be 0.8 seconds no matter what. And yeah, as you can see there in the ability description, the stun duration ignores diminishing returns on this, which can be really powerful. Next up, we have CABRAKAN's 2, which is Refraction Shield. This got some +1s going into SMITE 2. So basically, it is a cone damage ability. That's kind of all it does in the base form. It's going to do cone damage, but every time you take damage, and you can see this on your passive meter, you will gain like a little charge. We'll go fight this jungle camp, and you can gain up to 5 of these charges. So you can see my passive meter fills up there. That's I was taking damage like 3 times because there's 3 enemies in this camp. But yeah, it takes 5 hits total to get you up to this Refraction Shield maximum, and then it decays off over time, which you can see by the progress bar, and eventually you'll lose that. Basically, these stacks are going to be giving you bonus protections, and so basically as you're taking damage, you're going to be getting slightly more tanky. It's not a massive amount of protections, but it is noticeable. But the more crucial thing with this is once you've got it at max stacks, we'll just kill off this jungle camp. Once you've got it at max stacks, your 2 will now get on a separate cooldown, and it will stun instead, and it will also do strength-based damage, whereas the base form does int-based damage, just this regular hit is int-based. But if you've got your maximum passive stack, this is going to stun and do strength-based damage. The stun is pretty damn long. It will DR unlike the 1, but the stun is 1.3 seconds, which is pretty long in SMITE 2 terms. They did reduce a lot of the CC durations across the board. This is only 0.8. This is 1.3, which is a pretty long stun. Especially considering it's AoE, you can technically hit multiple people with this. And that is on a completely separate cooldown. So if we just turn off reduce cooldowns here, just to give it a bit more of a demonstration, we will get the enhanced version here from this happy camp. And so once you got the enhanced version, you can go over, you can use the stun, and you still have your 2 because it's on a completely separate cooldown. You can do your 2 as well, basically. And that the enhanced refraction shield has the same internal cooldown that will be tracked as your regular 2 will have. And this will actually be tracked on your passive meter. So you can see we've got the enhanced 2 right now. We'll stun them, and then you get a little timer here on your passive meter telling you how long until you can get another charge of that enhanced 2. Otherwise, you're just using your regular 2 on the regular cooldown, as it will show here. But you see in 2, 1... Now I can get another enhanced refraction shield. So even because this is on cooldown, like even if it's on cooldown, I'm still going to be able to get an enhanced refraction shield even with the regular one on cooldown. That's going to be on a completely separate cooldown that is tracked on your passive meter. And if that wasn't complicated enough for his second ability, this thing also restores mana per target that you hit and costs very little mana. The cost is only 10, but it gives you a refund of 26, well 10 up to 26 per target that you hit with this. So if we just use some mana here, you can see that when I hit targets, I'm going to actually gain mana from using this ability because it only costs 10. And it's going to be refunding you at minimum 10 per target. So even if you're only hitting 1 god with this at rank 1 of the ability, it costs nothing. Otherwise, it's going to be refunding you mana, which is quite essential because CABRAKAN's 3 is an ability that costs an absolute crap ton of mana, or it can at least. And basically, the 3 is going to create a tremor area around you that is going to vortex and pull enemies towards you, sort of like trembling them. It doesn't really work very well on the bots. The bots just decide they're going to run out of it. But on gods, this can actually be pretty impactful in terms of messing with their movement. It's not going to pull them straight into you like a Hades ult or anything like that, but it also just messes with their movement and stops them escaping so easily. They can't really run in like a straight direction very easily when they're in this ability. And you can channel this for a maximum of 10 seconds. So if we just sit here, you can go for a very long time with this ability if you really want to. Each one of those ground slams is going to do intelligence-based damage. This thing can hit incredibly hard. It's probably one of the highest damaging abilities in the game if you go for the full 10 seconds. But as you also saw there, it drains your mana like a motherfucker. So if you're going to just leave this on, it's going to be draining like 60 mana per tick. That's also just once for the ability. So you're going to drain your entire mana bar real quick if you just leave this thing on for like the full 10-second duration, which is why the 2 comes in handy. You know, you can use a lot of mana on the tremors. You're not going to be leaving it on for the full 10 seconds basically ever. Maybe if you're clearing a wave in the super early game, but even then you're going to drain all your mana doing that. But you might want to just like turn this on for a few seconds, drain a bit of mana, and then you can use your 2 to get a bit of that mana back if you're hitting multiple targets. So that's kind of like how the 2 and the 3 play together. The 3 costs an absolute ton of mana, but the 2 refunds you mana. And anytime while you are doing the tremors, you can right-click cancel it, and it will trigger a short cooldown of 4 seconds. So you can just turn that off, and you'll have it up very quickly again to just kind of refire it. But it also has a new +1 in Smite 2 where you can refire the ability itself, not a right-click cancel, but refiring it by pressing 3 or R in my case, and you will do another slam down that is going to cripple enemies and do strength-based damage. So the original slams are int based, the refire is strength based, and it's going to do a decent chunk of damage, cripple enemies so they can't easily jump away, but it's going to put it on a much longer base cooldown. You can see that goes on to about 12 seconds. It was 4 seconds before, so it's going to put it on 3 times the amount of cooldown, but that can be pretty crucial for like if you think enemies are about to jump away from you, think their movement ability is about to come back up or something, you can just press this, refire it. It's going to cripple them for a little bit, maybe allow you to follow up with like your 1 and 2 and stuff like that. But yeah, the 3 is an ability you've got to pay careful attention to in terms of managing it. You don't want to just leave it on the whole time and just burn through all of your mana. You also want to make sure you're not always refiring it, because you might want the cooldown to be able to like catch up to someone, 1 them, tremble them again, cancel it, you know, catch up to someone else, 2 them, tremble again. And if you're putting it on the longer cooldown every single time, it's going to be a while until you can do it again. But the refire can be really useful in terms of crippling people or getting a little bit of extra burst damage if you think they're going to escape. But finally, we have Cabrakan's ultimate, which is a bit more simple than some of his other abilities. So Tectonic Shift, this essentially just deals damage in a line in front of you and creates a wall of like 5 blocks. And these blocks can be broken by 3 basic attacks from enemies. Cabrakan can break them with any just 1 basic attack himself if he wants to, and you can also refire the ability to just bring all the walls down if you want to. You know, maybe if you're blocking your own team in with this or whatever, you could just immediately bring the walls down if you want to. But yeah, this is a pretty powerful ultimate. It can create like just an area where enemies can't really get out. You know, they're gonna have to run towards you a lot of the time because you know, you're kind of putting it like this. They're gonna run towards you. You can hit them with your 2. You can tremble them in this and just kind of keep them in there. It can be really good. And it also does solid damage as well. It's 60% in, 80% strength, 550 base damage. It does solid damage too, and it's also on a lower than average cooldown of 70 seconds at max rank. So yeah, mainly you're just going to use this to kind of get in on people. You know, you're kind of closing the gap. You press your 1, you press your ult, and so you can easily get in. They can't really just keep running away from you, and then you can do the rest of your kit on them. And that will be Cabrakan's combo in general. You'll press your 1, you'll run at them because you get all the extra movement speed, and then you'll 1, 2, and then maybe pop your tremors, maybe cancel them and catch up. With some CDR, your 1 and 2 will be back up pretty quickly, and then you can kind of keep running at people and stuff like that. You obviously use the ult, like I mentioned, to engage on people and do this if you want to. And this is, I'm never getting the enhanced 2 here because these bots aren't hitting me, but in a real game, people are going to be hitting you. You'll get the enhanced 2 for an extra stun and stuff like that. And so he can be super deadly, you know, both as a tank and a bruiser and even a damage dealer, kind of. I think he kind of works with damage, though it's not really the best way to play him, in my opinion. But speaking of, let's move into builds for Cabrakan, which is going to be an interesting section because he can kind of be played in several different roles and with several different build styles. He's got mixed scaling in terms of strength and int, and he's also mixed in terms of damage and tank and bruiser and all that kind of stuff. So I think we'll just go role by role. So in support, Cabrakan is very viable in support, in my opinion. He has a lot of incredibly impressive crowd control. You can keep people walled in with this. You can tremor them. You can stun them with this when you get the enhanced version. He's really good in support, in my opinion. In terms of starter, you can go for either selflessness or war flag, in my opinion. I think war flag is pretty good right now. It's going to give you that extra movement speed and attack speed also to your allies. I personally prefer war flag on Cabrakan. I like it for the aggression that it provides, but you can also go selflessness if you want. It's also really good. And you'll of course be upgrading that into war banner at level 15. Then in terms of your rush for the support role, usually I'm a big fan of Stampede on Cabrakan support because this just kind of synergizes really well. It's just a good item in general. I think this should be in most support builds regardless, but I rush it first on Cabrakan because it synergizes really well with your 1. You can pop your 1, pop this, you get insane amount of speed, and you can just like run at people and they can't really escape you. You can also get your team in there like in more late game in fights with Stampede. I think Stampede's super good. Then I'll probably go into like maybe a Gargoyle. I think Gargoyle is also really, really good for CABRAKAN because you can kind of CC chain people with it. You know, you can run in, you can do the stun, pretend they're stuns, and then you can Gargoyle them afterwards, and that's a massive CC chain that's going to take them a long time to get out of. You can also Gargoyle them before you press 3 as well. You can Gargoyle and press 3, and then they have a little bit more time spent in that tremble, and then, you know, once the Gargoyle's about to wear off, you can then cripple them with the 3, and you can get a lot of synergy that way. I think these 2 items are probably essential in basically any CABRAKAN tank build. I will build these in solo as well, but we'll go over solo builds a little bit later. But yeah, these 2 items, Screeching Gargoyle and Stampede, both incredible items in general, and both incredible items for CABRAKAN as well. Next, after that, I would usually go into a Binding. Binding, another item that is essential on CABRAKAN tank, in my opinion. Maybe even in a damage build, you might throw this in because it is flat pen. It is going to increase your damage. And basically, enemy gods hit by your hard CC effects lose 15 of each proc. So this will proc off of Screeching Gargoyle, but that's not really, you know, the main reason you're building it is because you just have this is stunning, this can cripple. Actually, I think cripple's not a hard CC, so it won't proc Binding. But you get the point. You know, you're 1 and 2 both stun. You're going to very easily be able to proc Binding. You engage with a CC as well. So, you know, as soon as you come in and land this, Binding's proc to everything else that you're doing after this is going to be getting increased damage. So yeah, Binding is absolutely incredible. I would usually go it probably around in 3rd slot, but you can kind of get it wherever you want, really. It just needs to be there. I'll quickly mention Life Binder as well. This isn't really like, you know, insane on CABRAKAN particularly, but it is just a really good item for supports right now. The base stats are pretty good for you, gives you a lot of health. And then the active effect is just kind of nuts. So usually I would build this thing like in 1st slot. It's not something I would build in 4th slot. You know, I would go it sort of like before and then just kind of shift the build all along one if you want to go Life Binder. And this is just a really efficient item for trading. It can also help keep your ADC alive in the laning phase or your mid alive when you're rotating. Basically, you mark an enemy, you deal damage to them, and then the next god, the next allied god that damages them will heal and shield themselves. And it's a flat amount. You don't need any amount of power for this to be doing a good amount of damage. It scales based on level plus a flat amount. So you can just kind of throw a Life Binder, you get free damage, and then when you proc it on them, you get to heal and shield yourself, or you can not attack them and wait for like your carries to hit them so they can heal and shield themselves. And the cooldown is mainly what makes this thing so attractive. It's up every 15 seconds, so waves are every 30 seconds. You can use this twice per minion wave, so you can use it like once on the wave and then either once afterwards for poke or for clearing a jungle camp or whatever. It will work for wave clear as well. It can give you additional wave clear. Not that CABRAKAN particularly needs that. He already has strong wave clear, but you know, if you don't want to use a ton of mana on your 3 or whatever, you can use Life Binder for that. And it's pretty good for CABRAKAN as well in general. You know, you can kind of one in Life Binder and then just immediately proc it afterwards. It's really, really efficient for trading in the early game. It's less good late game. It won't be as good of like a, you know, full late game build if you went Life Binder, but it's really good for an early game power spike. I think that's an option as well. Glad Shield is something that I like a lot on CABRAKAN. I think this is pretty close to mandatory. I would say these 3 items are mandatory. Glad Shield is damn close to mandatory on CABRAKAN in my opinion, even in the support role. Generally more of a solo lane item, but it is good on supports too, but CABRAKAN just uses this item so well. If you're building full tank, you have a lot of procs, which is what we're going to be doing in the support role. This thing's going to be dealing a crap ton of damage, and you can proc this so easily. You have very low cooldowns in general. You know, you can proc it with Tremors, 3-second cooldown, and I can proc Glad Shield again with that. Your 2 also will proc Glad Shield twice. You know, if you do the regular version, you take some damage. You do the enhanced version on top of that, it's going to be procking Glad Shield as well. And just in general, you can get so many free Glad Shield procs out with CABRAKAN. It adds a lot of damage. And so yeah, I'm a big fan of Glad Shield on CABRAKAN overall. I think it's pretty close to mandatory, even in support builds, and mandatory in solo. Cersei's Hexstone is another item that is absolutely incredible for CABRAKAN. This is the one that turns you into a boar and charges you forward, knocking people up. You do this, you knock them up. And the reason this is so good on CABRAKAN, it's a good item in general. It's much like Stampede and Screeching Gargoyle. These are just 2 really good active items that you want on supports anyway, but Cersei's Hexstone is particularly good on CABRAKAN because your 1 doesn't DR. Normally, if you engage with a Cersei's Hexstone and then follow up with a CC, Cersei's Hexstone is a knock-up, which is true hard CC. It applies 2 stacks of DR instead of 1. And so your future CCs that you will be hitting them with after you've charged in with Cersei's Hexstone will be 60% duration instead of 100%. But with CABRAKAN, your 1 doesn't DR, so you can Hexstone in, immediately follow up with the 1. They're going to be stunned for the full 0.8 seconds there. And that can be a really good way to engage if you don't want to just like, you know, press your 1 and run at people, or maybe press your 1 with Stampede and run at people. You can do that, but then you can also just like Hexstone and knock people up, stun them, do the rest of your stuff. So I think Hexstone really good on CABRAKAN as well. And this will probably be my 3 active items I will go on in every game. There are some other active items you could look at. You know, maybe if you want Talisman of Purification, you know, you're playing into an Ares or Ephemeria that's farming you because you have no CC immunity on your ultimate, you might want Talisman of Purification. In which case you drop one of these active items, probably Hexstone, but you could drop one of the other ones as well. But these are the general 3 active items that will go on CABRAKAN support, and probably in solo, but we'll talk about that in a second. And then honestly, for your last slot, there's kind of just a bunch of different options you can throw in. I think Osiris Wings is okay. It's got really good base stats, but you don't particularly need the slow immunity because this gives you slow immunity, and that's how you run at people anyway. But if you're into like really, really heavy, annoying CC comps, you can go for Osiris Wings. I think that's okay. Pribwin's also a pretty good item. It might be getting buffed next patch as well, which is kind of insane. It is an active item though, so you would have to drop one of your other active items for Pribwin, which is a little bit of a tough ask when Hexstone, Gargoyle, and Stampede are so good on CABRAKAN. So generally, I wouldn't go Pribwin, but if you don't want to use any of these active items for whatever reason, you can put Pribwin in there. Ruinous Ankh, obviously, if you need anti-heal, you buy this item. It's pretty efficient defenses for the cost anyway. So I think it's the cheapest item in the game, or it's one of the cheapest items in the game, and it gives you 40 of each prot. It's okay. And if you need the anti-heal, you should buy Ruinous Ankh. That should be in your build, and you will need anti-heal quite a lot of games. Voidstone, I think, is a viable option as well. I think this item's pretty good. It's just going to be 15% magical shred. This is particularly good if you have, you know, a high magical team. If you have like a Zeus mid or whatever with an Aladdin jungle, plus your CABRAKAN and support, Voidstone could be really good. It's more of a solo lane CABRAKAN item in my opinion, but you can throw it into support builds as well, and I think it absolutely works. Triton's Conch, also a viable option in my opinion. This just gives you strength, intelligence, max health, and a strength and intelligence aura that will also apply to you. So this is going to be giving you just a ton of stats that you want. You scale very heavily with strength and in. If you want a little bit more damage in your build, it also gives your allies some damage. I think Triton's Conch can be good. Shifters is a similar kind of item. It gives you prots and health, and it gives you strength or intelligence, whichever is higher, depending on if you're above 75% health or not. Shifters can be fine too. But in general, I'll just say close out this build with the Ruinous Ankh. You might want to get the Ankh earlier in your build if you think you really need the anti-heal. But a lot of games you will need anti-heal by the Ruinous Ankh. Otherwise, just pick up one of the other items I discussed here. And in terms of build order, you could also go kind of crazy with this. You know, you could get the Gargoyle much later. If you want a Hexstone early in your build, you can throw a Hexstone into like second slot if you want to. Or if, you know, maybe you want the Binding early for damage or whatever. You need the anti-heal earlier, put this here and get Hexstone last. Like, the build order is very hot swappable, I think, for this CABRAKAN build. All of these items are just incredibly good, and generally, you know, you're probably not rushing Glad Shield, for example, but you can kind of like switch around the order of a lot of these items. I just think these are the ones that are going to be really good for him. All right, let's move into some solo lane builds for CABRAKAN though. In terms of starter for solo, I think Bluestone Pendant into Bluestone Brooch is the way. This gives you a ton of extra on-hit damage on your abilities, on-hit tick damage. It's going to help you with wave clear, similar to Glad Shield that I talked about in the support section. You have many ways to proc ability-based item effects on CABRAKAN. You know, you've got your 3 on the very low cooldown, which you can cancel and get the low cooldown. You've got your 2 that you can cast twice. Your 1's on a relatively low cooldown as well. You've got a lot of ways to just easily proc Bluestone. It's also good for your early wave clear in solo. Then in terms of first item, I do think Lifebinder, again, is actually pretty good. This item's just a bit broken right now. It's very underrated. It can be insanely good for trading in lane. It gives you extra wave clear. So you can go Lifebinder just like you did in the early support build if you want to. I think Lifebinder's super good. It's kind of bad for your late game build, but in the early to mid game, it can give you a lot of pressure and get you ahead in farm by just giving you extra wave clear and really good trading potential. So if you like Lifebinder, if you think it's good, you can definitely go Lifebinder first in solo. But in terms of a more general build into like a physical matchup, I would just go Glad Shield first. As I mentioned with Bluestone and with Glad Shield in the support section, you have many ways to proc this throughout your kit, and you're going to get a lot of extra damage from it. The base stats are just pretty efficient as well. For solo lane, I also do like Phoenix Shield. I think you can go into this as well. The base stats, again, are pretty good. They have basically identical base stats, these two items. It's just Phoenix Shield has more health but less prots. But this thing's going to be healing you instead of dealing damage every time you cast an ability. And again, I'll say it for like the 15th time, this guy, CABRAKAN, has many ways to proc ability item effects. So Shield of the Phoenix is going to be giving you a lot of healing just from popping this, popping your 2 twice, popping this on a low cooldown. So I do think Phoenix Shield can be pretty good in solo lane builds as well. Stampede, again, still good. I will probably still go Stampede in a solo lane CABRAKAN build. It's just a really good item. Then, of course, that synergy, being able to get in with your 1 is really good for CABRAKAN. After that, again, I will probably go into like a Screeching Gargoyle and a Hexstone. Similar to support, I think these items are just incredible for CABRAKAN. Being able to CC chain people, you know, go in, pretend they're stuns, gargoyle them afterwards. You can CC chain them, pretty disgusting. And again, with Hexstone, you can go in, knock them up, follow up with the 1 with no DR, and that's really good as well. So I like, honestly, these 3 active items in any tank CABRAKAN build, personally. But as I mentioned, if you want something else like a Pribwin or a Beads or whatever, you can swap out one of these. Ruinous Ankh, again, if you need it, if your support doesn't have it or whatever, these always don't stack with each other, so generally you don't want to on a team. It can be okay just to make sure you've always got that anti-heal aura, like, on someone. one. But if your support doesn't have this or whatever, Ruinous Ankh, really good if you're playing into big healing. Stone of Binding, again, really good. That's probably what I would finish this build off with, honestly. You'll probably build it earlier in the build, to be honest. You'd probably build it like something like here or something like that. Stone of Binding, as I mentioned in the support section, incredible on Cabrakan. You engage with the CC, you can proc it with Gargoyle. It's just really good. And so yeah, that's probably the most generic Cabrakan solo build that I can give you. Again, order can be swapped around with a lot of these things. I think the Glad Shield Rush is pretty essential. Shield of the Phoenix probably makes sense straight after Glad Shield, give you that sustain and defense against your lane opponent. But then these last 4 items, you can really kind of swap them into whatever order you need, really. Like, all of these items are just so good that you can kind of go, you know, if you want more engage potential when you're rotating, go like Hexstone. If you want more CC chaining, go Gargoyle. If you want to do some team buffs and get in there, Stampede. You can kind of swap these 4 order around, kind of depending on what you want, really. I'll also mention Helm of Darkness. I think Helm of Darkness can be quite good. It is an active item, which means it competes with these 3, and I generally don't think Helm of Darkness is better than these 3. But if for whatever reason, you know, one of these 3 items gets nerfed, I think Gargoyle is getting nerfed next patch. We'll see what they cook up for nerfing this thing. But if, for example, one of these 3 active items gets nerfed and you don't want to build it anymore, I do think Helm of Darkness can be quite good. This is going to turn you invisible. So you can kind of like get in there, because Cabrakan doesn't really have a traditional like dash unless you're using Cersei's Hexstone to get into the fight. Just make sure you pop your 1 before it, because if you Helm of Darkness and then pop your 1, you're going to go on invisible. But if you pop your 1 before you Helm of Darkness, you can go invisible. You can kind of go pretty far and then just slam people out of invisibility. And I think Helm of Darkness can be a lot of fun and pretty good on Cabrakan as well. But again, it competes with a lot of these really powerful active items like Stampede, Hexstone, and Gargoyle. And I think generally I would rather go these 3 over a Helm of Darkness, but it's there as an option. And finally, let's talk a bit about Jungle Cabrakan, where I think he is also incredibly viable. So for Jungle Cabrakan, you definitely want Bombus Hammer. This synergizes with your 1 super well. After you cast an ability, your next basic attack is going to do bonus true damage and also heal you and reduce your cooldowns. This is just really good. You know, you press your 1, you're going to get that cooldown reduction immediately from Bombus Hammer. Look how low that cooldown is. I have 80% cooldown reduction on right now with hacks. But, you know, even without it, you know, you're just going to be taking a little bit of cooldown off of your 1 and all of your other abilities and whatnot. And just in general, even if you just AR cancelling regularly, Cabrakan's AR cancels aren't particularly good, honestly. He's got a very long pre-fire on his autos. You can see it takes ages for that swing to actually come out, even with a decent amount of attack speed. 1.22 is not a lot, but, you know, most of the gods with 1.22, their basic attack will come out faster than this. And so Cabrakan's not really great for, like, general AA cancelling, to be honest. But with your 1, Bombus Hammer is super good with that, obviously. And it's just better than Bombus Golden Dagger. And in terms of going into your build, I do think if you're going to go damage Cabrakan, strength is better. He scales pretty heavily with strength. Because int is more available, I would say in general, like, int is going to give you overall a tiny bit more damage on your abilities specifically, because like 60% int scaling versus 80% strength, that's actually going to favor intelligence, because you can get like 1.6 to 1.8 times more intelligence on your items. So it does actually favor int a little bit on most of his abilities, especially if you're going to sit there doing this on them for like multiple ticks. It's definitely going to favor intelligence for ability damage. But strength is going to give you extra auto attack damage, which is pretty relevant. It will also increase your clear speed in the jungle and stuff like that. Just because you're not always going to be using abilities on camps. You know, you might go in, you might do this, you might do... Okay, these are like level 1 jungle camps, but you get the point. Like, you could have your abilities on cooldown, and then you're going to be kind of like trying to punch camps. Strength is going to be better for that. And also, strength items are just really good right now. A lot of the passives and actives on strength items are just better than the ones on int items. So I think in general, you should lean more towards strength with the Cabrakan. You can go some hybrid, we'll talk about it, but I think in general, strength is better. And so I would start off probably with maybe like a Jotuns into Hydras. This is why I go on a lot of ability-based strength junglers. This gives you a total of 35 cooldown rate, which is really good. 45 with your starter in the late game, and just generally gives you a lot of like useful effects. You get cooldown reduction from Jotuns, you get the Hydra's passive that's going to be boosting your 1's damage. Well, not the 1's damage specifically, but the auto attack that comes with the 1 is going to be boosting that damage with Hydra, so you can chunk even more with your 1. And I think that's pretty good. Generally, then I would go into something like a Pendulum Blade. I think this item's kind of busted right now, to be completely honest. The base stats on it are pretty good. It's costly. It's like 2,800 gold, but it does come with 60 strength, 15 cooldown rate, which means, you know, in total in your build now, you've got 60 cooldown rate, which is basically 40% cooldown reduction. 65 cooldown rate is 40% reduction, so you probably got like 38% here, which is really good. And then you can Pendulum Blade for extra cooldowns back. It's really good for resetting your 1 and 2. It's also incredible with your 3, because you can 3 and then just immediately 3 again if you need to. You know, let's do a more reasonable example there. Let's say you kind of get in on someone, you use your 3, they jump away, you can chase them with your 1, press Pendulum Blade, you immediately got your 3 back up. And so it basically just resets your 3's cooldown if you don't use the refire, and also just gives you cooldowns back on a lot of these other things as well. Pendulum Blade is an incredible item in my opinion, and I would build it on Cabrakan jungle. Then I will probably go into a binding. Even on damage Cabrakan, I think binding is just way too good for him. It's going to give you a little bit of defense so you can get in there. You know, you're probably going to want at least a little bit of defense because you're going to have to press 1 and run at people like this. You're going to take some damage while you're doing that. You want to take damage to get your enhanced too. So having a little bit of procs, I think, is good. And binding provides that while also not losing out on that much damage, because 15 flat pen is going to be providing you, a lot of damage, even though the item has no strength on it. So yeah, binding, really good in my opinion. And then I'll probably finish the build off with something like Crusher, Heartseeker. These two items are just both incredible. This is just going to add extra strength scaling to all of your abilities. As we mentioned with like Glad Shield and Bluestone, Cabrakan can proc Crusher multiple times very easily. You can double 2, you can 3, you can Pendulum Blade, reset all your cooldowns, go for the 3 again. You've just got like a lot of ways to proc Crusher. And Heartseeker's the same. This one's going to deal % max HP based on your strength. And Heartseeker's just kind of broken right now. It just does way too much damage. See on this, that 165 number that keeps popping up? That's Heartseeker. You're just doing like an extra 165 damage on every ability. And this is a level 10 totem. Like most enemy gods probably have more health than that. So yeah, Heartseeker is just incredible. And this is probably the build I will be looking at for Cabrakan. You can throw in some other items. I think Parachute is really good. It's just kind of hard to find room in the build. You can maybe like not go Hydras and just go something like this and then a Parachute last, and that can be incredible. You just pop that, go absolutely huge. Slam people with insane amounts of strength that you've got, because you can go up to like 400 strength there, you see, without any pulse or any fire giant buffs or anything. So Parachute I think is really good as well if you want to try and fit that in your build. Staff of Mirrodin I don't think it's particularly good, but it is a lot of fun. This lets you double cast your next basic ability, and because the one stun doesn't DI, you can stun lock people with it pretty efficiently, like just stunning people a ridiculous amount. But I think Pendulum Blade kind of serves a similar purpose to Staff of Mirrodin while having better base stats and being less costly, because you can just kind of go in, you can you can stun them with the 2, you can do a little bit of this. Pendulum Blade, your 1's basically back up and you can stun them again. So I think Pendulum Blade overall is probably a better version of Mirrodin a lot of the time. But you can go both if you want, just be consistently stunning people. I think Mirrodin's quite a lot of fun. You could also go one of the support active items in this build if you want to go a little bit more bruiser. You could throw in like a Hexstone or whatever to kind of get in there. It gives you a little bit more defenses, and then you can use the Hexstone to get in there, knock people up and stun them and stuff like that. Honestly, with Jungle Cabrakan, you can go more of a full damage build like I was kind of showing you here with the Hydras in like that slot. And I think this is good, but literally you can throw out like any of these strength items except for maybe Heartseeker, because Heartseeker's just too good. But you could throw out like the Hydras and the Pendulum Blade and throw in like a Stampede and a Gargoyle. And then this is still going to be a really good build in my opinion. Cabrakan's insanely flexible with his builds, and this way you're going to be dealing a bit less damage, but you're still going to be incredibly tanky, and you've got utility through Hexstone and Stampede to be able to get in there and stuff like that. Like his builds are so flexible, you can like throw in a bunch of different stuff in these builds in my opinion. But yeah, if you are going to be going damage Cabrakan, I do recommend going more strength in the build over intelligence. I think it's going to be better for him overall. I will also quickly mention the double stacking build. I don't think it's good, but you can go like Book of Thoughts Transcendence, and having these 2 items fully stacked up is going to give you a crap ton of strength in. If we just spawn in a bunch of these totems on top of each other, we can just stack these up really easily. Oh my god, dude. But yeah, you can see there with just these 2 items fully stacked up, I'm getting 68 strength and 194 int. The 124 int is particularly high because Bumba's Hammer is giving me 60 as well. This gives you int or strength based on whichever's higher. So the 194 int, you can take 60 off of that. So it will be like 134 int, 68 strength in 2 items. It's also infinite mana and 20 flat pen because each one has 10 flat pen when it evolves. This can be really good. It is like one of the most efficient combos in the game in terms of getting your damage up, but also this doesn't really come with any other utility stats like cooldown or anything like that. And it's also just ridiculously slow to get online. If you try and do this in jungle, you're just going to have a really bad time. You're going to have no early game presence compared to if you went something like Jotun's Hydras. You're just going to be doing so much more damage with these 2 items throughout the early game. And the payoff, in my opinion, for like having a little bit more damage in your late game build just isn't worth it. I wouldn't bother double stacking on Cabrakan personally, but it is there as an option. Maybe in mid you could do it if you want to go mid. You basically go a similar build to jungle if you're playing mid damage Cabrakan, by the way. Just swap out the starter for like a Bluestone. But yeah, in general, I don't think double stacking is really worth it. I would just go build, something more like this with binding in here, and then Crusher Heartseeker. This would be like my most generic Cabrakan build I could give you for like damage jungle Cabrakan or damage mid Cabrakan if you wanted to. But yeah, there you go. Probably a very long guide. Oh, we haven't even talked about Relics, dude. It's going to be even a little longer. You go blink every time on Cabrakan though. There isn't really much to talk about there. I guess you might want beads in like very specific situations, but honestly, Cabrakan kind of relies on blink to be able to get in there. If you can't just like one and run at someone, you can just blink on them and instantly do it. You can also do some cool like animation cancel stuff with blink as well. Like you can pop your 1, start the auto, and then blink, and you can see that like instantly hits rather than having time to react to it if you press your 1, blinked, and then autoed them. If you do it this way, start the auto and then blink, it's going to hit immediately if you don't miss it like me. You can just kind of press your 1, start the auto, blink, and immediately hit them with it, and that can be really good at catching people off guard. And you can do the same thing with your ultimate, actually. You can start the channel, then blink. I did that a little bit early, actually. You can do it even a little bit like later. Blink, and then it does it like that. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with blink on Cabrakan in terms of like kind of pre-charging your abilities. You can even do it with the 2 if you wanted to. But generally the 2 isn't as good because if you're kind of blinking in, you've probably not been in combat with them too much. You won't have the enhanced refraction shield. But if you do have that, you know, you can go for the blink into instant stun with that and then follow up with your 1, no DR, stuff like that. There's cool stuff you can do with Blink on CABRAKAN, and I think it's just pretty essential for getting you in there. I wouldn't really go anything else, to be honest. But yeah, there we go. We're finally at the end of the guide. This is probably going to be the longest guide I've done on the channel, just because CABRAKAN is the king of versatility. He plays 3 roles, arguably 4 roles, and he has several different ways you can build him, from full damage to bruiser to full tank. There's a lot to think about with this character. There's a lot of different ways you can play him, so it's going to be a bit of a longer guide. But hopefully this has been helpful for you. I do think CABRAKAN is underrated right now. I think he's a very strong character, actually, and he's going to be getting some buffs in the upcoming patch to his scaling value. So a build like this is going to be doing even more damage in the next patch, which I think is kind of crazy. So yeah, definitely try out CABRAKAN with some of these builds, with some of these strategies, and I wish you luck in your games. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.